graciously sponsored by Mr. Ezra Sol Hedaya and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved grandfather, Ezra bin Abraham Hedaya, alav shalom. Additionally, this class graciously sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Boaz Orly Dromi, Le'ilui Nishmat, her beloved father, Mordechai ben Esther, alav shalom. Additionally, today's class dedicated by Yaakov Kobe Cohen and family for the refuah shlema of the child Heleni Orna Bat Hen Hannah. Additionally, we dedicate the class for the refuah shlema of the young man that Baruch Hashem had a successful surgery yesterday, Shelomo Martin ben Rosa and David ben Rosa Shoshana among the Holim of Am Israel. As we did before, today is the day of commemoration, or the way it's known among the Jewish people, Yom HaShoah, the day that we remember the tragedies of the Holocaust. And although 6 million people, lo alenu velo alechem, perish in the most tragic way, I'm not sure that we really know every one of those who left the world the day of their passing. Many of them were discovered after and during the Holocaust, but today was a day that was determined that we remember the souls of the holy people that were literally murdered through the regimes of the Nazis, Imach Shemam. So our best response to that is, besides praying and lighting candles, and there is a place here in Miami Beach, the Holocaust Memorial, that they devote 24 hours to read every single name of the 6 million people who passed away. Literally, they have list of peoples and they have volunteers throughout the day and night, and that's what they do. They read the names. So we're not going to go there, but we devote the class of today also Le'ilui Nishmatan, who were killed for only one reason and one reason only: being part of the Jewish people, being part of Am Israel. So our best response to the Holocaust, which we can also put into the pot Hamas and the Houthis and everyone in between that seek our destruction, regretfully, but yet we continue strong with our learning, with our prayers, with our mitzvot, with our pride to be a Jew, okay? To be proud of being Jewish and to live in a Jewish way, in a suitable way, and Be'ezat Hashem, we'll have the Nechama soon, B'mira v'yamenu, Amen. So today, we continue with our daily message of Sefirat Omer. Today is day number 11, in which Ishaq Avinu alav shalom, the host of the week, welcomes Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, Moshe, as we know, in the topic of the Sefirot, of the emotional attributes concerning what Moshe Rabbeinu represented, Moshe Rabbeinu represents an area which is interesting because one word can have so many different meanings. So the midah of Moshe is the topic known as Nesach. Nesach in Hebrew, in English rather, means eternity. Eternity, that's what Am Israel is. Am Israel is eternal. The Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu is eternal. The Torah writes in the Navi, Zichru Torah Moshe Abdi. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. Now, why was the Torah called Moshe? I'll tell you one more pasuk. Torah tzivalanu Moshe, Morasha Keilat Yaakov. The Torah that was commanded to us by Moshe Rabbeinu is the Morasha. Morasha means is the inheritance to the Jewish people. The Gemara say, Al tikre Morasha ela meurasa. Don't call it the inheritance, but call it the fiancé of the Jewish people. What this Gemara means, it says that the Torah and the Jewish people is like the relationship between a fiancé and the fiancé. In other words, between the groom and the bride. So here, interesting enough, talks about that the word Netzach also means victory. victory. Yesterday, somebody sent me a cute message about the few moments that we were discussing in yesterday's class, the different sports. Remember, we talked about soccer, World Series, American football, etc. But at the end of the day, when two teams compete with each other, what's the ultimate goal? To win. You win the game, you win the series, you become a world champion. They are madrigot of winning. So part of the message of the Sefirah of today is that a person must understand that we live a life that we do have scenarios, we do have challenges, we do have even hiccups. But our Torah gives us the power to win. And allow me to explain what how can we activate this particular message. As we discussed in the past, the days of Sefirat Omer are days of self-improvement. Basically, are days that our life carries this particular 49 days like a certain bonus to refine ourselves, even though the work of refining ourselves doesn't know a break, doesn't know a season. Yeah, escaping the winter of New York is seasonal. Leaving the heat of Miami is seasonal. Understand? Buying matzot is seasonal. You follow me? But as far as concerned self-improvement, those two words, which is what the Sefer Sfartem Lachem brings, doesn't know a season. Is there a day that you can say, you know what, today I'm going to allow myself to be upset 3 times only? Or today I'm not going to wake up early. Can you say such a thing? The idea is never to say such a thing. But let's say that a person says it. That's why Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, minyan, is popular. Keep going. It's beautiful. 9 o'clock, there's always customers for a Sunday morning, 9 o'clock. Somebody asks me, what do we do at 10 o'clock, minyan? Say, that's already too much. 9 o'clock, it's fine. Okay? But the Gemara, for example, brings, and the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, that as I said yesterday, we're going to be learning the weekly message of the Pirkei Avot. And in one of the Mishnayot, the Mishnah tells a story that they ask, not a story, but a statement, but I make up the story behind the scenes. A statement that was asked about Rabbi Yohanan. The Gemara itself, the story goes with Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel also brings in the Pirkei Avot that it says, they ask him, tell me what is the best formula for a person. And what did he say? Lo matzati laguf tov ella mishetika. They ask him, give us one tip for a good life. He says, the best tip for life is to stay quiet. Don't talk. Forget about Lashon Hara. If the only sin is Lashon Hara, I'm willing to deal with it. But talking has nothing to do only with Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, it's already a biblical sin. But that includes, but it sounds like an insurance policy, included but not limited to cursing, vulgarity, profanity, gossip, slander, speaking in a condescending way, speaking in a belittling way. How many did I say so far? 8. 8, and this is without thinking too much. Mistreating people verbally. That's why one of the questions, says the Gaon of Vilna, it says that there is another question that a person will be asked. And the question is, Imlachtet havercha, did you crown your friend? What does the meaning of did you crown your friend? What, your son, your friend is Shlomo Melech, David Melech, Shaul, or Hiskiyahu, that we learned about him on Yom Tov of Pesach. No, the language says if you treated your friend with the respect that a king deserves. It's heavy. And I'm not telling you every time your friend comes, you have to stand up. I'm not saying to do that. Unless it's an elder person. Kavod, if it's your father, your mother, you have to get up, etc. But the message there is, did you treat the person respectfully, properly? Now, says Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that talking doesn't take much effort. Staying quiet, you got to put together yourself. You got to put yourself together. That's the proper way. That's the reason what we discussed 2 days ago, the topic of the detriments of being an impulsive person or the benefits of being calm and being able to control the situation. So it says, when we stay quiet, we became victorious of being able to control. Sure, silence is gold. I don't know the price of gold today. Okay, I don't know, but I'm going to tell you what the Gemara says. That for every word, the Gemara tells that there was a city that people live a very long time. And they ask him, what was the merit? Says a few answers. One of them was, they always said the truth. They said emet. Other opinion says that they used to pay the person for the amount of words that the person spoke throughout the day. But they used to pay the person double for every word that a person didn't speak. Can you imagine? You cannot. Because it only happens in the time of the Talmud. Can you imagine today, we don't talk. Of course, today talking is part of life. And today the problem is that you don't need to talk. You can text, you can WhatsApp, you can write an email, you can post. So the dangers of making a mistake are much easier to be found that maybe 20, 30 years ago. That's why before you hit send, when you write a message or an email, think, read it. I do it all the time. I write, I think, I save, I delete, I rewrite. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I try. But no, don't say that, please. But I'm trying to apply what we are learning. And sometimes I feel the emotion on the way the message came in. And then I want to write like this person wrote. But I said to myself, hold on a minute. You are not that person. You need to be a mensch. Like we learned yesterday. Le'olam yehi adam. First, I need to be a ben adam. So therefore, it says Hafetz Haim. It says Hafetz Haim that sometimes a person wants to take upon themselves ta'anit yahid. Ta'anit yahid, that means that a person wants to take a fast day. No intermittent fasting. That's not what I'm referring to. Some people do it, Hazaku Baruch. But he says, the Hafetz Haim, do me a favor. He says, instead of fasting of eating, why don't you do fasting of talking? Ta'anit dibur. Ta'anit dibur is much more difficult but beneficial than ta'anit of food. Because how many days we go without fasting? I would hope not too many. But in my particular case, maybe the whole day went by. I only eat maybe 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock. There is something around available after the class, maybe So we can go with a fast day, not a big deal. But not to talk. Oh, says the Hafetz Chaim that the benefit is beyond our understanding. There was a great tzaddik in Eretz Israel. His name was Rabbi Scheinberg, alav shalom. Remember the rabbi who used to wear how many sets of talet katan? Remember him? Unbelievable amount. You know what says about him? That for over 60 years in his life, on Shabbat, did not utter a word that was not in Hebrew, and only on topics related to the sanctity of Shabbat and Divrei Torah. Now, I'm not telling you to become Rabbi Scheinberg overnight, because to become a tzaddik of that magnitude overnight, I'm not sure there is a reality. But I'm trying to show the sensitivity of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who says, best formula for your body, the less we talk, the less we get in trouble. Let us be honest among ourselves. In our homes, how many times we get into trouble just for something that we said? Correct? You went to that school? You're not the only one. I'm in the same school till today. Okay? At home, in school, in the synagogue, how many times people say things and then they realize, you know what? Why did they say such a cheap shot? Why did they say such a thing? So the self-control is you telling yourself, I'm in control. Like Ishaq Avinu. That was Moshe. Moshe's victory. What is Ishaq Avinu? Disciplined. Discipline, it makes us victorious. You see the relationship? I think is very clear. So here is the exercise for the day. Exercise number 1, stay quiet for 5 minutes. Ta'anit dibur. And know when I'm talking. Because to stay quiet when I'm talking, or to stay quiet when you pray, it's a given. But when you close the books, you go home, you go to your home, you go to the office, okay? Think before you speak and say nothing for 5 minutes. See how you're going to feel. You may say, Rabbi, what's 5 minutes? If you will know what 5 minutes can do, sometimes 10 seconds can ruin your day. True. Somebody said something to you, or the opposite. We said something, and then you got to deal with the long face, with the Tisha B'Av, with the Mara Shechora. That's the message of the day. Number 1, make a deal with God. Today, I'm taking upon myself 5 minutes. Don't do 6, don't do 17, 5 minutes. In Bodedut, of course. Sure, of course. And the next exercise will be, when you're about to say something based on impulse of negativity, try to take a step back. Think. You can say, I'd rather not answer at this moment. You don't have to wait 3 days. You can wait overnight. But guaranteed benefit. Guaranteed return. Next. Ben Adam lahavero. Now it's going to become a bit more challenging, because now we're dealing with interaction. The first case was, I stay quiet. I decide not to prolong the argument. I decide to take a step back for the sake of peace. I stay quiet for 5 minutes to, like he said, think about God. Think about good things. Think about blessings of your life, which we all have them. You need to count them. We have hiccups. I agree. Who doesn't have a hiccup? You know somebody who doesn't have a hiccup? Even people that leave the world have hiccups. Baruch אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. You ask what kind of hiccup they have? I tell you a few. Number one, what happens to their soul after they leave the body? Where do they go? Sometimes they go straight to the Kol Gan Eden. Sometimes they have to go to the rehab center to cleanse, to purify the soul. Another concern that the souls have, the neshamot, is the well-being of their families. The well-being of the families. The future of the families. The continuation of their families. That's why the Zohar says, I believe in Perashat Pinchas, that whenever there is a joyous occasion in a family, let's say a wedding, bar mitzvah, milah, pidyon, etc., neshamot, up to certain amount of generations, they are allowed to come down to be in the vicinity, in the room where the farah, the sebet, is happening. Why? Because to bring happiness to the souls, to bring the neshama joy. Because you have to understand, irrelevant of how a person was during their lifetime here, once the neshama goes up to Shamayim, they go to Olam HaEmet, the world of truth. This world that we are in is called Olam HaSheker, the world of deceitfulness. Why is it called deceitfulness? Because what you see is not what you get. In other words, sometimes people judge the book by its cover. Oh, he drives a fancy car, he has a nice watch, he lives in a nice building, must be a tzaddik. No, no, no. You can have all of the above, but there is a lot of improvement the person needs to have. Or you can be somebody on a simpler level, but is a much nicer person. That's what counts. In Shamayim, you see the emet. The neshama sees the emet. Why? Because the neshama feels Hashem's revelation. You know why the world is called in Hebrew Ha'olam? Why the world is called Ha'olam? Why don't you call the world Kadur Ha'ares, the planet Earth? If I ask you, Matay ata holech la'aretz, what is the meaning of that question? Matay, you said Israel, because we know that Eres is Israel. But if you're dealing with a person who doesn't know that Eres or Ares is our love nickname for Israel, they will tell you, Lama ata sarich lalechet, ata kevar ba'aretz. Why do you need to go? You're already on planet Earth. You understand? So the world, we don't call it Eres, because Eres or Aretz is earmarked for the true land, for Eres Israel. So that kavod is not taken away. Like the Gemara of today, we learned earlier, the Gemara writes and it says, it's better to live in Israel, in a city where the majority of the citizens are Goim, than to live outside of Israel, where the citizens, the majority of the citizens are Yehudim. Sure. Gemara, check the Gemara. Sure. 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 It's a very interesting Gemara. Now, relax. Relax. Nobody's packing their bags and leaving unless Mashiach comes now. It's a good day. I think it's a very good day for Mashiach to come. What do you think? You agree? You agree? You agree? You agree? What about you? You agree? So we have the Bedin in the Safra synagogue that agrees that today is a beautiful day for Mashiach to come. Amen. Okay, so we know that our baggage, our luggage, I should say, it's ready and we're ready to go. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody to leave. The opposite. If you're going to move to Israel, you better do your homework in advance in so many levels. And if you have children, you got to think as well because there is an adjustment period. And I'm saying this based on professional experience that people share with me some of the challenges that they experience when they do it or when they go without having like a proper guideline, community, city, language barrier, you know, all these things. But definitely, Eretz Israel is our ultimate destination. We know that we are in Galut. And we are, and according to the holy books, we're going to be in Galut not for too long. Not for too long. Bezat Hashem, Mashiach's arrival is about to happen. Just look at what's happening in the world. Look how the whole world suddenly is changing. There's a lot of shifting in the world, financial, economical, governments, nations, wars, peace. All these things are becoming slowly like different pieces of the puzzle, and the final picture, Be'ezat Hashem, sooner than later, it will be seen in front of us. But here it says, Men Adam lahavero, it says, try to make peace among people. It's not easy. It's sometimes easier to make peace between two strangers than with family. You agree? You agree? You agree? You agree? You agree? We all agree. We all agree. And it's uncomfortable. Believe me, as a rabbi, I don't do only weddings. Sometimes what I need to deal is damage control and peacemaking efforts. As I'm talking, I just got a message. There is a fire going on. We need the firemen. As I'm talking, I just saw it on my cell phone. Divine providence that we're talking about this. Okay? So, here he brings us an exercise. Devora. And I think that is important for me to expand 1 or 2 minutes. I'd like to finish on time today with your help. The discipline and the strength, sometimes, like we said before, like we said a few moments ago, that the self-control and benefit is beneficial for the person, but sometimes we need to muster up courage in order to do what's right. Right? Sometimes to ignore, I don't talk to him, I don't talk to him, I don't talk to her. Chazaku Baruch. Okay, what did we do? Nothing. The opposite. Sometimes that lack of action could be fueling more and more and more and more fire. And I'm not saying that it's easy to do this. I'll be the first one to say it's challenging, it's difficult, could be even painful, because sometimes you may be opening up old wounds, correct? Something that you try to avoid. But here is saying that a person needs to look at the bigger picture, at the longer term picture that deals with harmony and respect. Because sometimes the issue that brews within family drama, which that's one of the points that he's talking about today, is sometimes the way they speak, right? The way they speak. If I'm able to speak to you and I treat you respectfully, what I'm going to get back from you? Hazaku Baruch. Reciprocity. But if God forbid one of the two parties speaks in a very negative or condescending way, you think that the other person wants to make peace? The opposite. The person may say, I'm better off without talking. And every case, don't take what we just said as the rule. Every case has its own drama, its own scenario, its own peculiarity. But one thing is for sure, make sure that no one suffers because of these scenarios. Because suffering is not good. Suffering brings pain, anguish, God forbid, and takes a toll on the person. But one thing, as we learned yesterday about the children, the prayer for the children, and we said how a prayer benefits the future fiancé or the future spouse, one thing that we can definitely do, and no one can ever stop us, is praying. Pray. Pray if it's necessary for mental health. Pray if it's necessary to minimize the drama. Pray that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts good thoughts with that person. I pray often. And I'm saying this just to bring the statement into real life. I pray for a lot of things at all levels. Sometimes with names, sometimes it's a general blessings. But guess what? Even before I meet somebody or I meet a couple, I also pray. I pray that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives me the wisdom and the self-control. Because sometimes in certain meetings between husband and wives, you're listening at their bickering, you're listening at how they're talking to each other, and you want to explode and blow up and send them far. True? I know you're a good guy, so I'm sure you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay? But I'm telling you, as a rabbi who deals with a lot of cases like many of our colleagues, somebody asked me the other day, Rabbi, you seem to have a very interesting day. Can I spend a day or two with you? I said, of course, but I'm not sure if you're going to make it. Because you're going to get to hear and to do things that, not every day is a wedding or a bar mitzvah or plan a simcha. There are days that unfortunately there are scenarios. I have today two. One I took care of already earlier today. I have one coming up like 11ish, another one coming up maybe at 1 or 2 o'clock, plus a third one that I'm waiting for it to happen. This is just in a matter of few hours. This is besides the classes and the prayers and the office hours, etc. Working, that means working in the office. That's what I meant. So a fellow asked me, Rabbi, can I spend a day or two with you? They seem very interesting. I said, not everything is so happy and so beautiful the way it is. But if you want to spend a day with me, let me think about it. I'm not so sure, because you deal with sensitive matters. And obviously, privacy and confidentiality, is not negotiable. But I pray. What else I can do? Besides talking to the person, what else I can do? Pray. And that zechut that we all have is not only me. You can pray. You can pray. Everybody can pray. You also watching. Okay? Somebody emailed me a question yesterday, which I'm going to get the answer to clarify. Because I tell you what the question was. The question was, we spoke about Yaakov Avinu, we spoke about the Gemara in Sukkah. Remember the Gemara in Sukkah, that the girl married a Greek officer, and the Gemara says the father was the culprit in the sense of the way he talked. So the question was, what I think the mother, number one, but it wasn't so much about that, but also about Abraham and Ishaq. Abraham and Ishaq, they had one son, Ishaq, Esav, Ishaq, Ishmael, Mehila, Yaakov, and Esav. So how is it possible that they had Ishmael and Esav if Abraham and Sara and Ishaq and Rivka were Sadiqim? I think that was the gist, if I remember correctly, the question. So the first answer is, but I'm going to do further research. Belly Nether, I don't promise you when, but I'm going to give you, maybe somebody may have had this question as well, that I think that the message first in the Gemara of Sukkah, it wasn't blaming only the father, because the statement of Avaye in that Gemara was the mother or the father. Basically, the home. The home can be the stage of where this child grew up in, and he listened and absorbs. And that's why I mentioned the case of the father going to the synagogue. Usually the wife asks the husband, how was the synagogue? I don't recall ever that the husband asked the wife, how was the synagogue? Unless the husband couldn't go and he asked her, but usually the husband pays more attention. I know sometimes the ladies tell me, Rabbi, I love the Chazan. Why was he so quick? And then a man asked me, Rabbi, why it took so long? True, it's a matter of perception. Why so short? Why so long? The question is, where do you find the middle of the road, right? So in the case of Miriam bat Bilga, based on the Gemara and the commentators, the father was the one who did the service in the Bet HaMikdash, but didn't do it with honor, with happiness, with feeling proud that he had a zechut. He looked at it as a burden. And that feeling was transferred into the rebellion of his daughter. That's the Gemara. Abraham, Ishaq, and Yaakov. There are a couple of general statements. And I'll tell you one of them is that for events that happen before the giving of the Torah, we need to concentrate on the positive of the messages. In other words, Ishaq had a son called Esav. Esav. You know, the Ben Ishai asked a very known question. Didn't Ishaq know that Esav wasn't good? Right? If Ishaq was a Navi, the son of Abraham, the Akedat Ishaq, the Pasuk says, Vayav Ishaq et Esav kisayid befiv. Ishaq loved Esav because he was able to capture him with his mouth. In other words, when Esav will speak to his father, he will sound very holy, in the sense of, God made a miracle for me. That's how he will talk. He will invoke God's names, or will come to his father and he says, Dad, I have these. How do I give maaser of this tablecloth? So on the surface, it seems that he was very holy and he was able to fool Ishaq. You know what the Ben Ishai writes? Ishaq was not fooled at all. He knew of the behavior of his son. But Ishaq says, I have two ways of reacting. If I reject them, if I slam the door and I evict them from my home, guaranteed failure. If I keep the door open and I show him love, maybe I can keep an eye on him and guide him accordingly. That's what happened with Esav and Ishaq Avinu, which in the world of education today, in the Jewish religious world, including Hasidic world, which is obviously the most structured in many areas, they are activating what the Ben Ish Chai said over 100 years ago. Not closing the door, leaving the door open, especially in the cases that they have a child, God forbid, that is, needs to make a U-turn. And obviously pray. Obviously remember one thing, that whatever happens, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, they are writing history. So the Torah is telling us, yes, Abraham Avinu had the son, called Ishmael. The mother was Hagar. The grandfather was Paro of Egypt, the previous Paro, not the Paro of Moshe Rabbeinu's time. The Paro in Abraham Avinu's time was the father of Hagar. Paro says to Abraham, please take my daughter. I rather my daughter be a slave in the house of Abraham, than a queen or a princess in a land of immorality. That's how Hagar arrived to the house of Abraham. She was Sarah's helper. Sarah's helper was Hagar. And from there Ishmael was born. And Ishmael at the end did Teshuvah. Sure. So of course, there are a lot of scenarios, a lot of questions that we do not answer. But also remember that half of the background of the marriage of Abraham and Sarah, the background of Abraham and Sarah was very colorful to begin with. Abraham and Sarah were the first Jewish people in the world. So who were the parents? Goyim. But not regular Goyim. Goyim with Avodah Zarah. You understand? Also Rivka. Where do you think Rivka came from? You know who was the father of Rivka? Betuel. Lavan was her brother. Lavan was the sister. Lavan was the brother of Rivka. And Betuel was the father of Rivka. You know what was he called, Betuel? I'm not going to tell you, because we have ladies in the virtual audience. But I'll tell it to you in a hint. Any girl going to be married the night before the wedding needed to pay Betuel a visit. That's it. That's why Betuel is on Betulim. That was called Betuel. Promiscuous. And Lavan was a gangster. That's why she had to escape. And that's why she did not have children for 20 years. Because when Rivka left her family, Goim, immorality, promiscuity, a gangster-like, gave her a blessing. What blessing? Have a lot of children. If the children would have been born, these children would have been attributed to the blessings of their relatives, that they were wicked people. So from Shamayim, they blocked that statement, waited, and then she became a mother. And yet had issues with Esav. But obviously, the story of Avotenu HaKedoshim, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, there are things that happens behind the scenes and spiritual situations that did develop throughout history. But also it's an example for us. At the end of the day, for example, Pirkei Avot, and I finish with this. Pirkei Avot, the whole tractate of Pirkei Avot is based on Sefer Bereshit, on the first book of the Torah. And who are the main stars of the book of Bereshit? Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. That's why it's called Pirkei Avot. ethics of the fathers. Which fathers are you talking about? Abraham and Sarah, Ishaq and Rivka, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah. Their life is the fundamentals of Pirkei Avot, plus the bonus statements of the many Hachamim who lived that way. I'd like to say one more statement. In the Pirkei Avot is commonly found Hu Haya Omer. He used to say, in the Pirkei Avot we have a rule. If the Mishnah says, Rabban Gamliel Haya Omer, Rabban Gamliel Haya Omer, what's the meaning of that? Used to say. But Haya, he says, you know why Rabban Gamliel said this statement? Because he was that statement. Hu Haya, he was that person. When the Mishnah says, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, I did not found the best medicine for life like silence, because he promoted that value. He lived by that code. And because he was the master of that type of behavior, then he had a patent on it. You get it? Magnificent. My dear friends, have a lovely day, everybody. I gotta run. ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן בימינו בחנני ונקשה אומר צא הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך ידבר לנתון המזוות שנאמר אדוני חפש למען צדקו